Have you ever wondered how America became the economic powerhouse it is today? A lot of it traces back to a fascinating, chaotic, and incredibly transformative period known as the Gilded Age. From roughly the 1870s to the early 1900s, the United States underwent a seismic shift. It was an era of explosive industrial growth, groundbreaking inventions, and the rise of megafortunes that still boggle the mind. But as Mark Twain, who coined the term Gilded Age, suggested, this glittering surface of gold hid a much grittier reality underneath. This wasn't just one story. It was the story of two Americas, living side by side, yet worlds apart. Let's dive into the history of these two nations. Imagine the end of the Civil War. The nation is healing, and a new energy is taking hold. Railroads are crisscrossing the continent like steel veins, connecting markets and carrying resources from the vast American West to the bustling factories in the East. This is the dawn of the Second Industrial Revolution. Steel, oil, and electricity are the new gods. And their high priests are men with names you'll recognize: Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan. These men weren't just businessmen, they were titans, visionaries who saw the future and weren't afraid to build it, often ruthlessly. Andrew Carnegie, a Scottish immigrant who started as a telegraph boy, built an empire in steel. He revolutionized the industry with the Bessemer process, making steel cheaper and stronger than ever before. Suddenly, skyscrapers could scrape the heavens. Bridges could span impossible rivers, and railroads could bind the nation together. Carnegie's wealth grew to a scale that was previously unimaginable. Then there was John D. Rockefeller and his Standard Oil Company. He saw the chaos in the booming oil industry and decided to bring order to it, his order. Through shrewd tactics, he bought out competitors, controlled pipelines, and negotiated secret deals with railroads. By the 1880s, Standard Oil controlled about 90% of the oil refining in the United States. He became the world's first billionaire, a symbol of both American ingenuity and the controversial power of monopolies. These titans, along with financiers like J.P. Morgan, who organized massive corporate mergers, believed in what was called social Darwinism. They saw the economic world as a jungle where only the fittest survive. They believed their immense wealth was a natural outcome of their superior skill and hard work. Carnegie even wrote an essay called The Gospel of Wealth, arguing that the rich had a moral obligation to use their fortunes for the public good after they had accumulated it, of course. And to be fair, they did. Carnegie funded thousands of libraries. Rockefeller poured money into medicine and education, creating institutions that benefit us to this day. This was the gilded side of the coin. It was a world of lavish Fifth Avenue mansions, extravagant parties, and a belief that America was a land of limitless opportunity where any hardworking person could climb to the top. This narrative was powerful, and it drew millions from around the world. But while the Carnegies and Rockefellers were building their empires, another nation was taking shape in the shadows of their factories and mansions. This was the America of the urban poor, the millions of workers who fueled the industrial machine. From the 1870s onward, America's cities exploded in size. Immigrants poured in from Southern and Eastern Europe, from Ireland, from China, all seeking a better life. They were joined by farmers from rural America, pushed off their land by mechanization and economic hardship. They all flocked to the industrial centers, New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, looking for work, and work they found, but at a tremendous cost. The conditions in the factories, mines, and steel mills were brutal. A typical workday was 10 to 12 hours long, 6 days a week. There was no job security, no workers' compensation for injuries, and no safety regulations to speak of. Industrial accidents were horrifyingly common. In 1913 alone, an estimated 25,000 workers were killed on the job, and another 700,000 were seriously injured. Wages were pitifully low, often not enough to support a family. The entire family had to work, including children, some as young as 5 or 6. Working in coal mines and textile mills, their small bodies and nimble fingers seen as an asset. Where did these millions of people live? They were packed into crowded, unsanitary slums. In cities like New York, they lived in tenement buildings, dark, poorly ventilated apartment blocks where multiple families might share a single room. There was often no running water, no proper sanitation. Garbage piled up in the streets, and diseases like cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis spread like wildfire. The photographer and journalist Jacob Riis famously documented this world in his 1890 book, How the Other Half Lives. His stark photographs exposed the grim reality of tenement life to a shocked middle-class audience. He showed them the cramped quarters, the desperate faces, and the children sleeping on fire escapes or in alleyways. He revealed the other nation that existed just blocks away from the glittering mansions of the wealthy. So you have this stark contrast. On one hand, you have a captain of industry living in a palace, convinced his success is a sign of his fitness. On the other, you have a Polish immigrant working in a steel mill, losing a finger to a machine, living in a squalid tenement, and struggling to feed his children. They both live in the same city, they are part of the same economic system, but they inhabit completely different worlds. This massive gap between the rich and the poor created enormous social tension. Workers didn't just accept these conditions, they fought back. The Gilded Age was also the great age of labor unrest. Unions like the Knights of Labor and later the American Federation of Labor began to organize, demanding better wages, an 8-hour workday, and safer conditions. This led to some of the most violent clashes in American history. Events like the Haymarket Affair in Chicago in 1886, where a bomb at a labor rally led to a deadly police response. And the execution of anarchist leaders created a wave of anti-union sentiment. The Homestead Strike in 1892 saw a pitched battle between locked-out steelworkers and private security guards hired by Carnegie's manager. The Pullman Strike in 1894 shut down much of the nation's rail traffic before it was crushed by federal troops. To the industrialists, these unions were dangerous, radical threats to the American way of life. To the workers, they were the only hope for dignity and a fair share of the wealth they were creating. The government, for the most part, sided with big business. Using the courts and the military to break strikes and jail labor leaders, the system seemed rigged in favor of the powerful. So how do we make sense of this era of contradictions? The Gilded Age was the crucible in which modern America was forged. The industrial infrastructure built during this time laid the foundation for America's 20th century economic dominance. The philanthropic spirit of men like Carnegie, however self-serving it might have been, created public institutions that enriched the nation. But the immense social inequality and the suffering of the working class also sparked a powerful reaction. The excesses and injustices of the Gilded Age gave rise to the progressive era that followed. Journalists, social reformers, and politicians began to demand change. They argued that the government had a responsibility to protect its citizens and balance the scales of economic power. The story of the Gilded Age is the story of two nations, one of unprecedented wealth, innovation, and optimism, the other of grinding poverty, exploitation, and struggle. It reminds us that progress is often messy and uneven. The questions they faced are questions we still grapple with today. What is the proper role of government in the economy? What do we owe each other as citizens? How do we ensure that the incredible wealth a society generates benefits everyone, not just a select few? The Gilded Age may seem like a distant chapter in a history book, but its legacy is all around us. In the skylines of our cities, the foundations of our great institutions, and the ongoing debate about the very meaning of the American dream. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into America's Gilded Age interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what you think was this era, more of a golden age or a gilded cage. See you in the next video.